What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports. We're here on the Florida State channel at the voice of college football. In this video, we're going to preview the 2022 schedule for the Seminoles. Before we get into that schedule, let's look back at 2021. Florida State had one of the toughest schedules in the country last season. It was brutal. It wound up not being quite as bad as you thought preseason because Clemson was not as good as we thought. Florida was not as good as we thought they were going to be. I guess Notre Dame probably was pretty much as good as we thought. North Carolina wound up not being as good as we thought. Miami wound up not being as good as we thought. So it was a schedule that wound up not being as tough as we thought in the preseason. But then again, you could also say that, hey, look, Wake Forest, they were better than expected. NC State, better than expected. These were two really quality teams. So it was a tough schedule, but again, not quite the murderer's row that we thought preseason. And if you had asked me or told me before the season started that Florida State was going to beat both Miami and North Carolina but lose to Jacksonville State, I would have told you were crazy. And that's what kind of season it was for Florida State. Just a wacky year, and not just with Florida State, but with North Carolina and Miami both not being as good as they were expected to be. You know, these were preseason top 15 teams, and they did not live up to that. So this was a schedule last year. They did have Notre Dame in the non-conference, and then Jacksonville State, UMass, and Florida. So two tough games there with Notre Dame and Florida, and then not two cupcakes, because obviously what happened with Jacksonville State. And then you look at who they played out of the Coastal. Again, it was Miami and North Carolina. We thought that those were going to be the two top teams in that division. They wound up not being that. You know, Pitt wound up winning that division. So just a crazy year last season in all of college football. But Florida State's schedule wound up just not being what we thought it was going to be. And again, tougher in some ways, easier in some ways, but it did lead them to a 5-7 record. Let's go to 2022 now. Before we go game by game, here is that schedule. Let's look at who they play outside of their division, because obviously they're going to play everyone in the ACC Atlantic Division. They'll play Duquesne. They'll play LSU in New Orleans, and that's going to be a huge game. I mean, a huge game. A lot of question marks for LSU, a new roster. I think Florida State has a real chance in that game, even though it is in New Orleans. They'll also play Louisiana. This is really the time you want to play them, though. Imagine if they had to play them last season. That was a really good team. Really, over the last couple of years, Billy Napier's gone. They lose a lot of faces there at Louisiana. I really don't know how good they're going to be. So that could be a tough game, or maybe it's a game that Florida State rolls in, and then they'll have Florida at the end of the year, of course, and that'll be a home game this year. And they'll have a great opportunity to win that game because Florida, a new head coach, and a lot of question marks for them as well. But two SEC teams on the schedule with LSU and Florida. They'll play Georgia Tech, so a pretty favorable matchup there out of the Coastal, and then they'll play Miami, who they play every year, and it will be on the road this season. So going game by game, they have a week 0 game against Duquesne. That'll be, only a handful of games that first Saturday of college football, and they'll get to basically have a scrimmage there to get things started. But they'll have an extra bye week because of that, in a way, because they'll, later on in the year, they'll have 2 byes. So they'll have LSU on September the 4th, and it's nice to have that first game to kind of work the kinks out before playing LSU in a huge game, a monster game. That's an advantage for Florida. So for Florida State, I should say, I like that they scheduled that game on week 0. Could really help them out a little bit before playing LSU. Then it's Louisville on the 16th. That's a Friday night game. So all kind of things going on here. It's not just Saturday. They'll play in week 0. They'll play on a neutral field in their second game, and then they'll play on a Friday night on the road. So a very interesting schedule early, kind of gets you out of that normal routine, I guess, before they even get started having a routine for the season. They'll have Boston College on the 24th. That'll be a home game. And so, again, you look at this first month of the season, LSU and then Louisville on the road on a Friday night, that's pretty tough. That is pretty tough. Boston College should be a good one. Then we go to the month of October. They'll play Wake Forest. They will play them on the 1st. And by the way, they will have a bye week after LSU. So because they play that week 0 game, they'll have a bye week there in what would really be week 2 of the normal season. Wake Forest, then they'll play NC State on October the 8th, and then Clemson on the 15th. So you're talking about the 3 top teams out of the division last season. They play them all in a row. Wake Forest, NC State, and then Clemson. They get a bye week after playing Clemson. You might rather have that before Clemson, but that's the way the schedule worked out. And then they'll play Georgia Tech on October 29th. So if you do want to know if Florida State is going to be a contender in the Atlantic Division, you'll know after the 15th, because after playing Wake Forest, NC State, and Clemson, the top contenders in the division, if they lose, say, all 3 of those games or even 2 of those games, they're probably not going to be contenders. But if they can win even 2 out of the 3, Florida State's going to still be in the running. That is, again, if they take care of business against Louisville and Boston College. Then we go to the month of November, where they will play Miami on the 5th on the road. Huge game, of course. Then Syracuse on the 12th on the road. Back-to-back road games there. Louisiana on the 19th. Sorry to say Louisville. Louisiana on the 19th. That'll be a home game. And again, we don't really know how good that team is going to be. And then they finish off with Florida on the 25th. So a pretty tough schedule here. You got 2 SEC teams in the non-conference. Not too bad of a draw out of the Coastal with Georgia Tech. And then, of course, they play Miami every year. But this schedule, it's gonna be all about that month of October. Wake Forest, NC State, Clemson, those 3 weeks. And really, you could go even before that, starting with Louisville. You have 5 big division games in a row. Louisville, Boston College, Wake Forest, NC State, Clemson. If they're going to be contenders in the Atlantic Division, they're going to need to go 4-1 in that stretch, or at least 3-2. 3-2 might not be good enough, though, especially if one of those losses comes to Clemson. But that right there is going to tell us about Florida State and just where they stand in the ACC in 2022.